The scream tore through the howling wind before it was swallowed by the storm, and Vincent Yates heard it only because his horse had stopped dead in its tracks, ears pricked forward into the white chaos ahead. He had been riding for nearly 6 hours through the worst blizzard to hit the Arizona mountains in decades, trying to reach Tombstone before the passes became completely impassable. The year was 1883, and Vincent had spent the last 3 weeks driving cattle through the high country, earning wages that would see him through the winter. Now all he wanted was a warm bed at the boarding house and a decent meal that did not taste like trail dust and smoke. But his horse, a reliable gray gelding named Storm, refused to take another step forward, and Vincent had learned long ago to trust the animal's instincts. He dismounted, his boots sinking into snow that reached nearly to his knees. The cold bit through his heavy coat and leather chaps, and the wind threatened to knock him sideways. He pulled his hat down tighter and squinted into the whiteness, leading Storm forward with careful steps. That was when he heard it again, fainter this time, almost lost in the storm's fury, a woman's voice calling for help. Vincent's heart kicked hard in his chest. No one should be out here in this weather, not this far from town, not with night coming on fast. He moved towards the sound, his hand on Storm's bridle, using the horse as an anchor against the wind. The pine trees stood like dark sentinels around him, their branches heavy with snow. And then he saw it. A massive ponderosa pine had fallen, probably under the weight of the snow and ice, and beneath its thick trunk, partially buried in the snow, was a woman. She was on her side, her face pale and streaked with snow, her dark hair plastered to her cheeks. Her eyes found his, and he saw fear there, and pain, but also a fierce determination that struck something deep inside him. "Hold on," he shouted over the wind, dropping to his knees beside her. "I'm going to get you out." "My leg," she gasped, her teeth chattering. "I cannot feel it anymore." Vincent brushed snow away from where the tree pinned her, his mind racing. The trunk was easily 2 feet in diameter, probably weighing close to 1,000 pounds. Under normal circumstances, it would take several men and proper equipment to move it. But there were no other men, no equipment, and if he did not get her out soon, she would either freeze to death or lose the leg entirely. "What is your name?" he asked, needing to keep her talking to keep her conscious. "Lily," she managed, her voice shaking. "Lily Richardson." "I am Vincent Yates," he said, already moving around the tree, assessing angles and leverage points. "How long have you been here, Lily?" "I do not know," she said, and he could hear the tears in her voice now. "An hour, maybe. I was trying to reach Tombstone before the storm got worse. My horse threw me when the tree started to fall. She ran off." Vincent pulled off his gloves and ran his hands along the trunk, finding where it rested on a partially buried boulder. If he could lift from the right point using his legs and back together, he might be able to raise it enough for her to pull free. It was going to hurt, possibly injure him, but there was no other choice. "Listen to me carefully," he said, moving back to where he could see her face. "When I lift this tree, you are going to have to pull yourself out as fast as you can. Do not try to stand. Just drag yourself clear. Do you understand?" "You cannot lift that alone," Lily said, her eyes wide. It is too heavy." "I do not have a choice," Vincent said simply, "and neither do you." He positioned himself at the optimal point, planting his feet wide in the snow, getting his hands under the trunk. The bark was rough and cold against his palms. He took 3 deep breaths, said a quick prayer to whatever might be listening, and then drove upward with everything he had. The pain was immediate and enormous. It felt like his spine might snap, like his legs might buckle, like his arms might tear free from his shoulders. He roared against it, a sound that came from somewhere primal and desperate, and felt the tree move, just an inch, then 2, then 3. "Now!" he bellowed. "Move now!" Through the red haze of effort, he saw Lily dragging herself forward, her hands clawing at the snow, her face twisted with agony. She was not fast enough. His arms were shaking, his vision starting to darken at the edges. "Faster," he grated out, and somehow she found more speed, more strength, and then she was clear, rolling away from the tree. Vincent let go and staggered backward, falling hard into the snow as the trunk dropped back down with a muffled thud. For a long moment he just lay there, his chest heaving, his entire body screaming. Then Lily's face appeared above him, snow falling on both of them, and she was crying. "You did it," she said. "You actually did it." Vincent forced himself to sit up, every muscle protesting. "Can you move your leg?" Lily tried, wincing. "A little. It hurts terribly, but I can feel it now." "That is good," Vincent said, getting to his feet with a groan. "That means nothing is severed. But we need to get you warm and get that leg looked at, or you will lose it anyway." He whistled for Storm, and the faithful horse came through the snow. Vincent pulled blankets from his bedroll and wrapped them around Lily, then very carefully lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, or perhaps adrenaline was still giving him strength he should not have. He got her settled across Storm's saddle, then climbed up behind her, pulling her against his chest to share body heat. "Tombstone is still 3 miles, he said. "Can you hold on that long?" "I do not have a choice," Lily said, echoing his earlier words, and despite everything, Vincent felt himself smile. The ride to Tombstone was the longest 3 miles of Vincent's life. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and visibility was almost zero. He relied on Storm's instincts and his own knowledge of the terrain, keeping Lily wrapped tight against him, talking to her whenever he felt her start to drift. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "What were you doing out here alone?" "I teach school," Lily said, her voice muffled against his coat. "In Tombstone. I had gone to visit a student's family in the mountains. They are homesteading up near the pass. I should have stayed the night, but I thought I could make it back before the storm hit. I was wrong." "You are a teacher," Vincent said, filing that information away. "That explains the determination. My teacher back in Kansas was the most stubborn woman I ever met." "Where in Kansas?" Lily asked. "Dodge City," Vincent said. "Long time ago now. I have been drifting west for the past 5 years, working cattle ranches, taking jobs where I can find them." "Do you like that life?" Lily asked. "The drifting?" Vincent was quiet for a moment, considering. "I did," he said finally. "But lately I have been thinking it might be time to settle somewhere, put down roots." "Tombstone is a good town for that," Lily said. "Despite its reputation, there are good people there, families trying to build something lasting." They fell silent after that, both conserving energy, and Vincent focused on keeping them moving forward. When the lights of Tombstone finally emerged from the snow, he felt relief so strong it was almost painful. The town was mostly shut down against the storm, but he knew where to go. He guided Storm down Allen Street to the doctor's house, a small adobe building with a lamp burning in the window. Vincent dismounted and carried Lily to the door, kicking it with his boot. "Doc Morrison, I need help." The door opened almost immediately, revealing a gray-haired man with spectacles and quick, intelligent eyes. "Good Lord," Doc Morrison said, "to get her inside. What happened?" "Tree fell on her in the storm," Vincent said, carrying Lily into the warm interior. The heat hit him like a physical force after hours in the cold. "Pinned her leg for close to an hour." Doc Morrison directed him to place Lily on the examination table, then immediately began cutting away her skirt to expose the injured leg. Vincent turned away, giving her privacy, but the doctor waved him back. "I may need your help, son. Can you handle it?" "Yes, sir," Vincent said. The examination seemed to take forever. Doc Morrison was thorough, his hands gentle but probing, asking Lily questions about sensation and pain. Her answers came through gritted teeth, but she never cried out, and Vincent found himself admiring her fortitude even more. Finally, the doctor sat back. "You are a very lucky young woman, Miss Richardson. The leg is badly bruised, and you have some torn muscles, but nothing is broken, and I do not see signs of serious vascular damage. You are going to be in considerable pain for the next few weeks, and you will need to stay off it as much as possible, but you should make a full recovery." The relief on Lily's face was profound. "Thank you, doctor." "Thank this young man," Doc Morrison said, nodding at Vincent. If he had not gotten you out when he did, we would be having a very different conversation right now. How did you manage to move that tree alone?" Vincent shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable with the attention. "Did what needed doing." Doc Morrison studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "That you did. That you did indeed." He turned back to Lily. "I am going to splint and wrap the leg to keep it stable. You will need to stay here tonight so I can monitor you. After that, you will need somewhere to rest for at least a week, preferably longer." "I can go back to the boarding house," Lily started to say, but the doctor shook his head. "Mrs. Patterson's place has stairs, and you are not going to be managing stairs for a while. Do you have family in town?" "No," Lily said quietly. "I came here from Missouri 2 years ago to teach. I am alone." Vincent found himself speaking before he had really thought it through. "She can stay at my place." Both Lily and Doc Morrison turned to stare at him. Vincent felt heat rising in his face, but pressed on. "I rent a small house on the edge of town. Just 2 rooms, but there are no stairs. I can sleep in the barn. It would only be until she can manage on her own again." "Mr. Yates," Lily said, her cheeks flushed, "I cannot impose on you like that. You have already done so much." "It is not an imposition," Vincent said, "and it makes sense. The doctor is right. You need somewhere safe to recover, and you cannot do that in a boarding house with stairs and no one to help you." Doc Morrison was nodding thoughtfully. "It is not a conventional arrangement, but these are not conventional circumstances. Miss Richardson, I think you should accept. Vincent Yates is a good man. I have treated him a few times over the years, and he has always been honest and respectful. I will visit daily to check on your progress, which should satisfy any concerns about propriety." Lily looked between them, and Vincent could see her wrestling with pride and practicality. Finally, practicality won. "If you are certain it would not be too much trouble." "I am certain," Vincent said. Over the next hour, Doc Morrison treated and wrapped Lily's leg, gave Vincent detailed instructions on her care, and provided laudanum for the pain. By the time they were ready to leave, the storm had lessened slightly, though snow was still falling steadily. Vincent borrowed a small cart from the doctor and settled Lily in it, surrounded by blankets, then led Storm through the quiet streets to his small house. It was not much, just 2 rooms and a lean to barn out back, but it was clean and dry and his. Vincent had rented it 6 months ago, the longest he had stayed anywhere in years. He carried Lily inside and placed her carefully on his bed, the only real piece of furniture he owned besides a table and 2 chairs. "I will make a fire," he said. "Get some warmth in here." While the fire took hold in the small stove, Vincent heated water and made coffee, strong and bitter. He helped Lily sit up enough to drink some, then gave her the dose of laudanum the doctor had prescribed. Within minutes, her eyes began to droop. "Thank you," she murmured, "for everything. I do not know how I can ever repay you." "You do not need to repay me," Vincent said quietly. "Just get well." He watched her slip into sleep, then settled himself in the chair by the stove with his own cup of coffee. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the small house was warm and quiet. Vincent found his gaze drawn again and again to the woman in his bed, this teacher named Lily Richardson, who had shown such courage and strength. He had saved her life today, had lifted that impossible weight through sheer desperation and will, and in doing so he had the strangest feeling that he had also changed the course of his own life in ways he could not yet understand. The storm lasted 3 days. Vincent spent that time caring for Lily, helping her with basic needs while trying to preserve as much of her dignity as possible, cooking simple meals, changing the dressings on her leg under Doc Morrison's supervision. At night, he slept in the barn despite her protests, wrapped in blankets with Storm's body heat to keep him from freezing. During the days when Lily was awake and the laudanum had not pulled her under, they talked. Vincent learned that she was 24 years old, had come west after her parents died of cholera, seeking a fresh start and a sense of purpose. Teaching had given her that purpose. She loved the children in her classroom, loved watching them learn and grow, loved feeling like she was helping to build something good in this rough territory. In turn, he told her about his own past, about growing up in Kansas, the son of a farmer who had lost everything to drought and grasshoppers, about going to work as a cowhand at 16, learning the trade from hard men who lived hard lives, about the fight that had killed his best friend and sent Vincent running west, afraid of what he might do if he stayed, afraid of the violence he carried inside him. "Do you still carry it?" Lily asked. "That violence?" Vincent considered the question seriously. "I think it is still there," he admitted. "But I have learned to control it, to channel it into work and purpose. When I lifted that tree off you, it was not violence I felt. It was just pure need to save you, to get you free. Maybe that is what I have been looking for all these years, a reason to use my strength for something good instead of something destructive." Lily reached out and took his hand, her fingers small and warm in his. "You saved my life, Vincent. That is as good as it gets." Something shifted between them in that moment, some invisible line crossed. Vincent felt it like a physical thing, a tightening in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire in the stove. He looked at Lily and saw her looking back at him with something in her eyes that made his breath catch. "Lily," he started to say, but she squeezed his hand. "I know," she said softly. "I feel it too." They did not speak of it again that day, but it hung in the air between them. This new understanding, this new possibility. By the fourth day, the storm had passed and the sun emerged, turning the snow-covered town into something beautiful and strange. Doc Morrison proclaimed himself satisfied with Lily's progress and reduced his visits to every other day. Lily was able to sit up for longer periods, though she still could not put weight on her injured leg. Vincent fashioned a pair of crutches from sturdy branches, and Lily practiced moving around the small house, her determination evident in every awkward step. He found himself watching her with a mixture of admiration and something deeper, something that he was beginning to recognize as the early stirrings of love. It should have been impossible. They had known each other less than a week, but there was something about the circumstances of their meeting, the intensity of that moment in the storm, that had stripped away all the usual pretenses and defenses. They had seen each other at their most vulnerable and most determined. They had shared a space so small that privacy was almost impossible, and through it all, a respect and affection had grown that felt as solid and real as anything Vincent had ever known. On the fifth day, as Lily sat at the table working on lesson plans for when she could return to teaching, Vincent made a decision. He put on his coat and hat and told her he would be back soon, then walked through the snowy streets to the small church where Reverend Thomas held services. The Reverend was a kind man in his 50s who had come to Tombstone to minister to the miners and cowboys, to try to bring some light to a town known for its darkness. Vincent had attended services a few times, but had never spoken privately with the man. Now he knocked on the door of the small rectory and waited. Reverend Thomas answered with a warm smile. "Vincent Yates, is it not? Come in, come in. What brings you here on this cold morning?" Vincent stepped inside, turning his hat in his hands. "I need some advice, Reverend, about a situation I find myself in." Over coffee, Vincent explained everything. The rescue, Lily's recovery, the arrangement that had brought her into his home, and the feelings that had developed between them. The Reverend listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. When Vincent finished, Reverend Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What you did for Miss Richardson was heroic and selfless, and the care you have shown her since speaks to your character. But you are right to be concerned about propriety. Tombstone may be a rough town, but Miss Richardson is a school teacher. Her reputation matters, both for her own sake and for her position." "I know," Vincent said. "That is why I am here. I need to know the right thing to do." "The right thing," Reverend Thomas said slowly, "is to be honest. With yourself, with her, and with the community. If you have feelings for Miss Richardson, real feelings that go beyond gratitude or circumstance, then you need to declare them properly, court her as she deserves to be courted. And as for the living arrangement, perhaps it is time to involve some of the good women of the community. I know Mrs. Cooper, the banker's wife, has been concerned about Miss Richardson. She would be willing to chaperone, I am certain." Vincent nodded slowly. The advice made sense, even if part of him resented the need for it. But he cared about Lily, cared about her future, and her standing in the community, and that meant doing things the right way. He returned home to find Lily attempting to move around the small house on her crutches, practicing until her arms shook with effort. When she saw him, she smiled, and Vincent felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. "I have been thinking," he said, helping her back to the chair, "about us, about this situation." Lily's smile faded slightly, replaced by wariness. "What about it?" "I do not want to do anything that would harm your reputation or your position as a teacher," Vincent said carefully. "So I spoke with Reverend Thomas. He suggested that we arrange for a chaperone. Mrs. Cooper, perhaps. That way you can continue to recover here without any questions about propriety." He watched Lily's face, trying to read her reaction. She was quiet for a long moment, her gaze on her hands folded in her lap. Then she looked up at him, and there were tears in her eyes. "You went to the Reverend for me?" she asked softly. "For both of us," Vincent corrected, "because I care what happens to you and I do not want my help to turn into harm." "You are a good man, Vincent Yates," Lily said, and now the tears were falling, tracking down her cheeks. "Better than you know." Vincent reached out and gently wiped the tears away with his thumb. "I care about you, Lily. More than I probably should after only a few days, but I do, and I want to do right by you." Lily caught his hand, holding it against her cheek. "I care about you too. So much it frightens me sometimes." They sat like that for a long moment, the connection between them almost tangible. Then Vincent cleared his throat. "So, Mrs. Cooper, should I ask her to come?" "Yes," Lily said, smiling through her tears. "That would be proper." Mrs. Cooper arrived that afternoon, a bustling woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She took in the situation with a single comprehensive glance, then nodded approvingly. "You have done well, Mr. Yates," she said. "But Miss Richardson needs a woman's care now. I will stay here during the days, and my daughter Martha can come in the evenings. Between us, we will see that everything is above reproach." With the arrival of Mrs. Cooper and her daughter, the small house became much more crowded, but also more lively. Mrs. Cooper proved to be an excellent cook, and she took over the kitchen with the efficiency of a general commanding troops. Martha was 18, bright and cheerful, and she and Lily took to each other immediately. Vincent found himself spending less time in the house and more time working, taking odd jobs around town to keep himself busy and to earn money. He repaired fences, mucked stables, helped at the freight office. The work kept his hands busy, but his mind remained on Lily, on the woman recovering in his bed, on the future that was beginning to take shape in his imagination. 2 weeks after the storm, Lily was able to walk short distances without crutches, though she still tired easily. Doc Morrison declared that she could return to teaching within another week, as long as she kept the leg elevated whenever possible, and did not overdo it. The news should have made Vincent happy, but instead he felt a strange sense of loss. Once Lily returned to her normal life, once she moved back to the boarding house, would these feelings between them fade? Would the intensity of their shared experience dissipate into something ordinary and forgettable? He was pondering this as he worked in the barn one evening, repairing tack by lamplight, when the door opened and Lily appeared, moving carefully on her crutches. "You should not be out here," Vincent said, standing quickly. "It is cold, and the ground is uneven." "I needed to talk to you," Lily said, away from Mrs. Cooper's well-meaning but constant supervision. Vincent smiled at that. "She does rather fill a room, does she not?" "She does," Lily agreed, "but I am grateful for her help and for yours. Vincent, I have been thinking about what happens next. When I go back to teaching, when I move back to the boarding house." "I have been thinking about that too," Vincent admitted. "I do not want this to end," Lily said, her voice steady, but her eyes uncertain. Whatever this is between us, I know it is fast, I know it is strange, but it feels real to me. More real than anything I have felt before. Vincent crossed the barn to her, stopping close enough that he could see the lamplight reflected in her eyes. It feels real to me too, he said. Lily, I have been drifting for 5 years, never staying anywhere long enough to build anything lasting. But when I look at you, I see a reason to stop drifting. I see a reason to stay. Then stay, Lily said simply. Vincent reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his calloused palms gentle against her soft skin. I am going to court you properly, he said, the way you deserve. With flowers and walks and Sunday dinners, I'm going to give this town no reason to gossip about you, and then, if you will have me, I'm going to marry you. Lily's breath caught. That sounds like a plan. A good plan, Vincent asked. The best plan, Lily said. And then she was leaning forward, and Vincent was meeting her halfway, and their lips touched in a kiss that was soft and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing a little harder, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. I should take you back inside before Mrs. Cooper sends out a search party. Lily laughed. She probably already has Martha stationed at the window. They made their way back to the house together, Vincent keeping a careful hand on Lily's arm to steady her. Inside, Mrs. Cooper took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly, but said nothing, for which Vincent was grateful. The courtship that followed was everything Vincent had promised. He brought Lily flowers, wild flowers at first since the winter made other varieties scarce, then bought roses from the mercantile when they came in on the stage. He took her for walks, short ones at first as her leg continued to heal, then longer ones as spring began to edge out winter. They attended church together on Sundays, sitting in the back pew, and had dinner afterward with Reverend Thomas and his wife. Vincent found work at the Running J Ranch just outside town, a steady job as a hand that came with decent wages. The work was hard but familiar, and he was good at it. The ranch owner, James Yancey, was a fair man who appreciated a worker who did not need constant supervision. Within a month, Vincent was promoted to foreman, overseeing a crew of 6 other cowboys. The extra money allowed him to start saving, planning for a future that included more than just himself. He began looking at parcels of land around Tombstone, imagining where he might build a house, where he might start his own small ranch someday. Meanwhile, Lily returned to teaching, and Vincent discovered a new pleasure in hearing about her days, about the children she taught and the challenges she faced. One of her students was a boy named Thomas, the son of a prospector who could barely read when the term started. Lily worked with him every day after school, patient and encouraging, and by spring he was reading at grade level. The pride in her voice when she told Vincent about Thomas's progress made him love her even more. On a warm evening in late April, as they walked along the edge of town where the desert met the mountains, Vincent stopped and turned to Lily. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, and she looked so beautiful in that light that it almost hurt to look at her. Lily Richardson, he said, taking her hands in his, I love you. I think I have loved you since the moment I saw you trapped under that tree, fighting to survive. You are the strongest, bravest, most incredible woman I have ever known, and I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. Will you marry me? Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling, a smile so bright and joyful that it rivaled the sunset. Yes, she said, yes, Vincent, I will marry you. Vincent pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a small diamond that had cost him 2 months' wages. He slipped it onto her finger, and then he kissed her, right there on the edge of town where anyone could see, because he did not care anymore about propriety. He only cared about this woman who had changed his entire life. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church, with half the town in attendance. Lily wore a dress of ivory silk that Mrs. Cooper and Martha had helped her make, and she carried a bouquet of desert wildflowers. Vincent wore his best suit, cleaned and pressed, and tried not to shake as he waited at the altar. When Lily came down the aisle on Reverend Thomas's arm, since she had no father to give her away, Vincent felt his throat close up with emotion. She was so beautiful, so perfect, and she was choosing him. Him, a drifter and cowboy with more past than future, but maybe that was the point. Maybe the past did not matter as much as what you chose to do with your present. They spoke their vows in steady voices, promising to love and honor and cherish each other for as long as they both lived. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed Lily with all the love and hope he carried in his heart, and the congregation erupted in applause. The reception was held at the Cosmopolitan Hotel, the finest establishment in Tombstone, and the food and drink flowed freely. Vincent danced with his bride, holding her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit in his arms. They danced until Lily's leg began to ache, and then they sat and watched others dance, their hands clasped together. As the evening drew to a close, Vincent and Lily slipped away to the house that was now truly theirs. Vincent had spent the past weeks fixing it up, adding a proper bedroom, painting the walls, building furniture. It was still small and simple, but it was clean and comfortable and theirs. That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Lily curled against Vincent's side, her head on his chest. She said quietly, "Do you ever think about that day? The storm?" "Every day," Vincent admitted. "It was the day my life changed, the day I stopped running." "I think about it too," Lily said, "about how easily it could have gone differently if you had not heard me, if you had not been strong enough to lift that tree, if you had not cared enough to try." "I will always be strong enough for you," Vincent said, tightening his arm around her, "and I will always care enough to try. Whatever comes, we face it together now." "Together," Lily agreed, and then she kissed him, and words became unnecessary. The first year of their marriage was a time of adjustment and growth. Vincent continued to work at the Running Jay, saving money and learning the business side of ranching from James Yancey. Lily taught school during the term and spent her summers helping Vincent with his plans for their future. They bought 40 acres of land east of Tombstone, good grazing land with a creek running through it. Vincent began building their house with his own hands, working evenings and weekends. It was slow progress, but it was solid progress, and he took pride in every board he set, every nail he drove. Lily helped when she could, holding boards steady, mixing paint, offering suggestions for layout and design. They worked side by side, and their partnership deepened with every shared task, every shared decision. In the late summer of their first year together, Lily told Vincent she was pregnant. They were sitting on the half-finished porch of their new house, watching the sunset, when she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "There is a baby in there," she said softly. "Our baby." Vincent stared at her, the news taking a moment to penetrate. Then joy exploded through him, so intense it brought tears to his eyes. "A baby," he repeated. "We are going to have a baby." "You are going to be a father," Lily said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Are you ready for that?" "I do not know," Vincent admitted, "but I will learn, just like I learned everything else that matters." Their son was born the following spring, on a warm April morning when the desert was covered in wildflowers. The labor was long and difficult, and Vincent paced outside the bedroom where Doc Morrison and Mrs. Cooper attended Lily, feeling more helpless than he had since the day he found her trapped under that tree. When the baby's cry finally pierced the air, Vincent burst into the room without waiting for permission. Lily looked exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. Doc Morrison was smiling. "You have a healthy son, Vincent. Congratulations." Vincent approached the bed on shaking legs and looked down at his son. The baby was red-faced and squalling, his tiny fists waving, and he was the most beautiful thing Vincent had ever seen besides his mother. "What should we name him?" Lily asked, looking up at Vincent with tired eyes. Vincent thought about all the people who had shaped his life, who had helped him become the man he was. He thought about the Reverend who had guided them, about Doc Morrison who had saved Lily's leg, about James Yancey who had given him a chance. But in the end, he thought about the future, not the past. Daniel, he said, Daniel James Yates, a name for a new life, a new beginning. Daniel, Lily repeated, smiling. I like it. Hello, Daniel. Welcome to the world. Daniel proved to be a healthy, happy baby with his mother's dark eyes and his father's stubborn determination. Vincent took to fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to everything else, learning to change diapers and warm bottles, to soothe Daniel when he cried in the night, to marvel at every small milestone. They moved into their new house when Daniel was 3 months old. It was finished enough to live in, though Vincent continued to add touches over the following months. The house had 3 bedrooms, a large kitchen, a sitting room with a stone fireplace, and a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides. It was the finest thing Vincent had ever built, and knowing that his family would grow up here filled him with a satisfaction deeper than anything he had known. Lily took a year off from teaching to care for Daniel, but she missed her students and the intellectual challenge of her work. When Daniel was old enough, they hired a young woman named Sarah to help with the baby during school hours, and Lily returned to her classroom. She thrived there, her passion for education undiminished. Vincent's work at the Running Jay continued to prosper. He had a gift for managing cattle and men, for knowing when to push and when to ease back. James Yancey came to rely on him more and more, and when James's health began to fail, he offered to sell Vincent half the ranch, making them partners. It took careful negotiation and some creative financing, but by the time Daniel was 2 years old, Vincent owned half of one of the most successful ranches in the territory. It was more than he had ever dreamed possible, this life he had built from nothing. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching Daniel toddle around the yard, chasing chickens and laughing, Lily said, "Do you ever miss it? The drifting? The freedom?" Vincent considered the question, watching his son stumble and catch himself, then keep going. "No," he said honestly. "I thought freedom was about having no ties, no responsibilities, but real freedom is having something worth staying for, someone worth building a life with." Lily leaned her head on his shoulder. "I am glad you stayed." "I am glad you were trapped under that tree," Vincent said, then laughed at how absurd it sounded. "That came out wrong?" "No," Lily said, laughing too. "I know what you mean. I am glad too. Glad the storm brought us together. Glad you were strong enough and crazy enough to lift that tree. Glad every day that led us here." 2 years later, their daughter was born. They named her Rose, and she came into the world with the same determination that characterized both her parents. She was smaller than Daniel had been, more delicate, but she had a will of iron and a smile that could charm anyone. Daniel, now 4 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would sit beside her cradle for hours, talking to her in his serious little voice, telling her about the ranch and the horses and the chickens. Rose would watch him with her wide blue eyes, and Vincent would watch both of them and feel his heart expand with a love so vast it seemed impossible his chest could contain it. The years flowed past like water in the creek that ran through their property. Daniel grew tall and strong, learning to ride and rope and work cattle alongside his father. Rose grew up wild and free, climbing trees and riding horses and refusing to be constrained by anyone's expectations of what a young lady should be. Lily continued to teach, shaping young minds and earning the respect of the entire community. And Vincent built his ranch into one of the finest in Arizona territory, known for quality cattle and fair dealing. Through it all, the bond between Vincent and Lily only deepened. They had their disagreements, their difficult moments, but they always came back to each other, always remembered what they had built together. On their 10th anniversary, Vincent took Lily back to the place in the mountains where he had found her trapped under the tree. It was summer now, not winter, and the forest was green and alive. They found the spot easily, the fallen tree still there, now covered in moss and slowly returning to the earth. Lily stood looking at it for a long moment, then turned to Vincent. "I sometimes wonder what my life would have been like if this had never happened," she said. "If I had made it to town before the storm, if I had never been trapped." "Regrets?" Vincent asked, though he knew the answer. "Never," Lily said firmly. "This was the best thing that ever happened to me. Even the pain, even the fear, because it brought me you." Vincent pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I lifted that tree with strength I did not know I had," he said. "But you lifted me out of a life I did not know I was trapped in. You gave me purpose, family, love, everything that matters." They stood there for a long time, two people who had found each other in the worst of circumstances and built something beautiful from it. Around them the forest whispered its approval, and the sun filtered through the trees, and everything was as it should be. When Daniel turned 18, he announced his intention to attend the new university in Tucson to study business and modern ranching techniques. Vincent was proud of his son's ambition, even as he recognized that it meant changes were coming. Rose, now 14, had her own dreams. She wanted to be a veterinarian, a profession almost unheard of for women, but she had her mother's determination and her father's strength of will. Vincent and Lily supported both their children in their ambitions, even when those ambitions took them away from the ranch. They had learned long ago that love was not about holding on tight, but about giving room to grow. On a cool evening in early fall, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, Vincent said, "We did well, you and I." "We did," Lily agreed. She was 50 now. Her dark hair threaded with silver, lines around her eyes from years of smiling and squinting into the sun. To Vincent, she had never been more beautiful. Two children growing into remarkable adults, a ranch that prospers, a community we helped build. We did very well indeed. "I was thinking today about that moment," Vincent said, "when I first saw you under that tree, when I knew I had to lift it or lose you. I did not know you then, not really. But something in me knew you were important, knew you were worth any risk, any effort. Some things the heart knows before the mind catches up," Lily said wisely. "My heart knew you that day, too. Knew you were someone who would always fight for what mattered, who would always be strong enough when it counted." Vincent reached over and took her hand, their fingers lacing together as naturally as breathing. "I love you, Lily Yates. Every day, every moment, I love you." "And I love you, Vincent Yates," Lily said. "Thank you for lifting that tree. Thank you for lifting my whole life into something I never dreamed possible." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their beginning on that desperate night in the snowstorm. Below them, the lights of Tombstone twinkled in the gathering darkness, and beyond that, the vast Arizona territory spread out under the endless sky. Their story had started with a storm and a tree and a moment of desperate strength. It had grown into something vast and lasting, built on love and respect and the simple choice to stay, to build, to create something meaningful together. And as they sat on their porch, still holding hands after all these years, they knew that their story was far from over. There would be grandchildren someday, more laughter and joy, more challenges to face and overcome together. There would be seasons of plenty and seasons of hardship, as there always were in this unforgiving, beautiful land. But whatever came, they would face it side by side, two people who had learned long ago that together they could lift any weight, weather any storm, overcome any obstacle. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying memories of that long ago winter day, and Vincent squeezed Lily's hand gently. She squeezed back, and in that simple gesture was everything they had built, everything they had become, everything they would always be to each other. Years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and sorrows. Daniel graduated from university and returned to the ranch, bringing with him new ideas and techniques that helped the operation become even more successful. He married a kind woman named Elizabeth, and they gave Vincent and Lily their first grandchildren, twin boys who were every bit as wild and determined as their grandfather had been at that age. Rose pursued her dream of veterinary medicine with the same fierce determination she brought to everything. She faced discrimination and doubt, but she persevered, eventually opening her own practice in Tombstone. She became known throughout the territory for her skill and compassion, treating everything from cattle to house cats with equal care. Vincent and Lily watched their children and grandchildren with pride and satisfaction, knowing that the values they had worked so hard to instill had taken root. They taught their grandchildren about hard work and integrity, about standing up for what was right, about loving fiercely and completely. On their 25th anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house was filled with noise and laughter, with children running and adults talking and the good smells of Lily's cooking filling the air. As Vincent looked around at all these people, his children and grandchildren and the friends who had become family over the years, he felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. After dinner, Lily stood and raised her glass. "I want to make a toast," she said, and the room fell quiet. 25 years ago, I married the man who saved my life. But he did more than save my life that day in the snowstorm. He gave me a reason to live fully, to love completely, to build something lasting. Vincent, you are my partner, my best friend, my great love. Thank you for every moment of these 25 years. Vincent stood and took her hand, his throat tight with emotion. Lily, you saved me too. You saved me from a life of drifting and emptiness. You gave me purpose and family and joy. You are my everything, and I will love you until my last breath. They kissed, while the room erupted in applause, and then the grandchildren were clamoring for the story they had heard a dozen times but never tired of. The story of how Grandpa had lifted the tree to save Grandma, how they had fallen in love during a snowstorm, how they had built this life together from nothing. Vincent and Lily exchanged a glance, then settled into their chairs, the grandchildren gathered at their feet. Vincent began the story the way he always did, with the truth. It was the worst storm I had ever seen, and I heard a scream through the wind. I found your grandmother trapped under a fallen tree, and I knew I had to get her out or she would die. How did you lift it, Grandpa? One of the twins asked, eyes wide. It was so heavy. Love, Vincent said simply. I lifted it with love, even though I did not know it yet. Sometimes the heart knows what it needs before the mind understands. Lily picked up the thread of the story, telling about the ride to Tombstone, about Doc Morrison and Mrs. Cooper, about the courtship that followed. The children listened, rapt, and the adults listened too, smiling at the familiar tale. When the story was finished, when the grandchildren had been put to bed and the guests had departed, Vincent and Lily walked out to the porch together. It was their favorite place. This porch where they had spent countless evenings talking and dreaming and simply being together. 25 years, Lily said softly. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have been together forever. Both are true, Vincent said. Every day with you is fresh and new, but we have also built something timeless. They stood at the porch rail, looking out over the land they had claimed and tamed and made their own. The moon was rising over the mountains full and bright, turning the landscape silver. In the barn, the horses shifted and nickered. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate. Do you think about it anymore? Lily asked, and the life you left behind? The drifting? Vincent considered the question seriously, as he always did when she asked. Sometimes, he admitted, but only to marvel at how empty it was. I thought I was free, but I was really just lost. You gave me something to belong to, someone to belong with. That is true freedom. Lily leaned against him, and Vincent wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They had stood like this countless times over the years, finding comfort and strength in each other's presence. It never got old, this simple act of being together. I want you to know something, Lily said after a while. If I could go back and change anything, even knowing how much it hurt, I would not. I would not trade that moment of being trapped for anything because it brought me to you. I feel the same way, Vincent said. Every hardship, every struggle, every moment of doubt led me to that forest, to that storm, to you. And I would do it all again in a heartbeat. They stayed on the porch until the moon was high overhead, talking and remembering and dreaming about the future still to come. When they finally went inside, they moved through their nighttime routine with the easy familiarity of 25 years together. And when they lay down in their bed, Lily curled against Vincent's side the way she always did. "Good night, my love," she whispered. "Good night," Vincent replied, kissing the top of her head. "See you in the morning." And in the morning they would wake together and face a new day side by side as they had for 25 years, as they would for all the years to come. The seasons continued their eternal cycle, and Vincent and Lily moved into the golden years of their life together. They were in their 60s now, their children fully grown with families of their own, their grandchildren growing tall and strong. The ranch prospered under Daniel's management, though Vincent still worked when his body allowed it, unable to fully give up the routines that had defined so much of his life. Lily had retired from teaching, but she still tutored students who needed extra help, and she had started a small library in Tombstone, funded by donations and her own money. It was her pride and joy, this room full of books that allowed anyone to explore worlds beyond the Arizona territory. On their 30th anniversary, they decided to return once more to the place where their story had begun. It was winter again, though not as harsh as that long-ago storm, and they rode together on horseback through the familiar trails into the mountains. The fallen tree was still there, though it had deteriorated significantly over the decades, becoming part of the forest floor. New trees had grown up around it, a testament to the cycle of life and death and rebirth that governed this wild land. Vincent and Lily stood looking at it together, their hands clasped, their breath misting in the cold air. So much had changed since that day, but the core of who they were to each other remained constant. "I have been thinking," Vincent said, "about legacy, about what we leave behind when we are gone." "And what do you think our legacy is?" Lily asked. "Our children, of course," Vincent said, "and our grandchildren. But it is more than that. It is the values we taught them, the example we set. It is the ranch and the library and all the small ways we have tried to make this community better. But most of all, I think our legacy is this." He gestured between them. "This love we built. This proof that even in the hardest circumstances, even starting from nothing, two people can create something beautiful and lasting if they are willing to work at it." Lily smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I like that legacy." They stood in silence for a while longer, paying tribute to the moment that had changed both their lives. Then they mounted their horses and rode back down the mountain, back to the life they had built together. That evening, surrounded by family once more for their anniversary celebration, Vincent found himself watching Lily as she held their newest grandchild, a baby girl named Lily Rose, after both her grandmother and great-aunt. The sight of her with that baby, her face soft with love, transported him back to the early days of their marriage, to when she had held Daniel and Rose with that same tender expression. "Grandpa," one of his grandsons said, tugging on his sleeve, "will you tell us the story again?" Vincent looked around at all the faces turned toward him, young and old, and he realized that this was part of their legacy too. This story that had become family legend, a reminder of where they had come from and what they had overcome. "All right," he said, settling into his chair. It was 1883, and the worst snowstorm in decades was tearing through the Arizona mountains. He told the story again, with Lily adding details he forgot, and their children and grandchildren listened as if hearing it for the first time. When he got to the part about lifting the tree, his grandson asked the question he always asked, "But Grandpa, how did you do it? How did you lift something so heavy all by yourself?" Vincent looked at Lily, at the woman who had been his partner in his love for 30 years, and he gave the answer he always gave, the only answer that mattered. When you love someone enough, he said, you find strength you did not know you had. You do what seems impossible because the alternative is unthinkable. I lifted that tree because I had to, because the thought of not lifting it, of losing your grandmother before I ever really knew her, was worse than any pain or injury. Love gives you that strength, and once you find it, it never leaves you. Grandpa is a hero, the youngest grandchild declared, and the others nodded in agreement. No, Vincent said gently. I am just a man who found something worth fighting for. Your grandmother is the real hero. She survived being trapped. She built a life from scratch in a strange place. She taught hundreds of children to read and think and dream. She made me want to be better than I was. That is true heroism. Lily reached over and took his hand, squeezing gently. No words were needed. After 30 years, they communicated as much through touch and glances as through speech. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow. James Yancey passed away, leaving his half of the ranch to Vincent in his will, making Vincent the sole owner. It was bittersweet. This success bought with the death of a friend and mentor. But Vincent honored James's memory by running the ranch according to the principles the older man had taught him: fair dealing, hard work, and respect for the land. Rose married a fellow veterinarian she had met at a conference, a kind man who supported her work and her independence. They settled in Tombstone, building a joint practice that served the entire territory. Daniel and Elizabeth had 2 more children, expanding the family and filling the ranch house with even more noise and laughter. Vincent and Lily became great-grandparents, marveling at the newest generation, at these children who would carry their legacy into the 20th century. They told the story of the snowstorm and the tree to these new little ones, watching their eyes grow wide with wonder. On a warm spring day, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset as they had done countless times before, Vincent said, I have lived a good life, Lily, better than I ever thought possible. We have lived a good life, Lily corrected gently. Together. Together, Vincent agreed. That has always been the secret, has it not? Everything we accomplished, we did together. We make a good team, Lily said, smiling. The best team, Vincent said. They fell into comfortable silence, watching as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. Vincent felt a deep peace settle over him, a sense of rightness and completion. He had found what he was searching for all those years ago, even when he did not know he was searching. He had found home, family, purpose, love. He had found everything that mattered. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? Lily asked. For being trapped under that tree, Vincent said, and they both laughed. The same laugh they had shared when he first said those words decades ago. For giving me a reason to be strong. For building this life with me. For every moment of every day we have shared. The pleasure was mine, Lily said, taking his hand. Thank you for lifting that tree. Thank you for choosing to stay. Thank you for loving me so completely. They sat hand in hand as the stars began to emerge overhead. The same stars that had witnessed their beginning, the same stars that would shine long after they were gone. But they were not thinking about endings. They were thinking about all the moments in between, all the days and nights and seasons they had shared, all the love they had built from that single moment of desperate courage in a snowstorm so many years ago. Vincent and Lily lived into their 80s, blessed with health and clarity of mind. They saw Daniel's children marry and have children of their own. They saw Rose's veterinary practice expand to include 3 associates. They saw Tombstone grow from a rough mining town into a thriving community with schools and churches and cultural institutions, and they knew they had played a part in that transformation. On their 50th anniversary, the entire town threw them a celebration. It seemed like everyone in Tombstone and the surrounding ranches came to honor the couple who had become symbols of enduring love and partnership. There were speeches and toasts and the presentation of a plaque commemorating their contributions to the community. But the moment Vincent treasured most came at the end of the evening, when he and Lily were finally alone again on their porch. The house was quiet. The guests departed. the stars bright overhead. Lily leaned against him, and Vincent wrapped his arms around her, and they simply existed together in perfect contentment. 50 years, Lily marveled. Half a century. Best 50 years of my life, Vincent said, every single day. Even the hard ones? Lily asked. Especially the hard ones, Vincent said, because we faced them together and we came through stronger on the other side. They were quiet for a moment. Then Lily said, "Do you remember what you said to me that first night, when you brought me here to your little house?" "I said a lot of things that night," Vincent replied. "You said I just needed to get well," Lily reminded him, "that I did not need to repay you for saving me. But Vincent, I have spent 50 years trying to repay that debt anyway, trying to be worthy of the sacrifice you made, the risk you took." Vincent turned her in his arms so he could see her face, so she could see the truth in his eyes. "Lily, there was never any debt. What I did that day, I did because it was the only thing I could do. Because even in that moment before I knew you, before I loved you, I knew you mattered. And every day since has only confirmed that truth. You do not owe me anything. You never did." "Then what do we owe each other?" Lily asked. Vincent thought about it, about all the years and all the love and all the moments, big and small, that had brought them to this point. "Gratitude," he said finally. "We owe each other gratitude for the life we built together, for every choice we made that brought us closer, for every moment we chose love over fear, partnership over independence, together over alone." "I am grateful," Lily said softly, "so very grateful." "As am I," Vincent said, and then he kissed her, soft and sweet and full of 50 years of love. They stayed on the porch until late that night, talking about everything and nothing, remembering and dreaming, celebrating not just their anniversary but the entire life they had shared. And when they finally went inside and lay down in their bed, they held each other close, two people who had learned long ago that the greatest strength came not from standing alone, but from standing together. Vincent Yates passed away peacefully in his sleep on a cold January night, 3 months after his 85th birthday. He was surrounded by family, his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered at the ranch to say goodbye. But most importantly, Lily was there, holding his hand as she had held it countless times over their 52 years together. His last words were for her, "Thank you for letting me lift that tree." "Thank you for being strong enough to do it," Lily replied, tears streaming down her face. "I love you, Vincent." "I love you too," Vincent said, "always." And then he closed his eyes and was gone, slipping away as gently as falling asleep after a long, productive day. The funeral was the largest tombstone had ever seen. It seemed like everyone whose life Vincent had touched came to pay their respects. They spoke of his strength and his fairness, his love for his family and his dedication to his community. But mostly they spoke of his love for Lily, the great romance that had begun with a snowstorm and a fallen tree and a moment of desperate courage. Lily lived for 5 more years after Vincent's death, and though she missed him every day, she did not let grief consume her. She continued to work at the library, to spend time with her family, to live fully and completely as she knew Vincent would have wanted. She told the story of how they met to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive through the telling. On her 90th birthday, surrounded by her family in the house Vincent had built, Lily felt a deep tiredness settle into her bones. She knew her time was coming, could feel it, the way animals feel an approaching storm. But she was not afraid. She was ready to see Vincent again, to be reunited with the man who had been her partner and her love for so many years. That night, she asked to be taken to the bedroom she had shared with Vincent. Her children helped her into bed, and they gathered around her, holding her hands and telling her how much they loved her. "Tell us the story, Mom," Daniel said. "One more time." Lily smiled, her eyes already starting to close. "Your father saved my life in a snowstorm," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He lifted a tree that should have been impossible to move. He was the strongest, bravest man I ever knew, and he loved me with everything he had." We built a good life together, a beautiful life. And now I am going to see him again." "We love you, Mom," Rose said, tears in her voice. "I love you all," Lily said, "so much. Take care of each other. Remember what your father and I tried to teach you. Love fiercely, work hard, build something that lasts." Those were her last words. She closed her eyes and did not open them again, slipping away peacefully with her children around her. They buried Lily next to Vincent in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking their ranch. The headstones were simple, just their names and dates, and a single phrase Vincent had chosen years before: "Together always." The ranch passed to Daniel, who ran it according to the principles his father had taught him. The library and tombstone was renamed the Yates Memorial Library in honor of Lily's decades of service. Rose continued her veterinary practice well into her 70s, finally retiring to spend more time with her own grandchildren. The story of Vincent and Lily became legend in Tombstone and the surrounding territory. Parents told it to their children, who told it to their children in turn. It became a parable about love and courage, about the strength that comes from caring more about someone else than about yourself. And on cold winter nights, when the snow fell soft and quiet over the Arizona mountains, people would sometimes speak of the cowboy who lifted an impossible weight to save the woman who would become his wife. And they would marvel at the love story that began with that single moment of desperate strength and grew into something that outlasted both of them, a legacy of love that would endure for generations to come. The house that Vincent built still stands today, inhabited by his descendants, a testament to the life he and Lily created together. The fallen tree where they first met has long since returned to the earth, but the forest still whispers their story on the wind. And in Tombstone, in the library that bears their name, their photograph hangs on the wall, a cowboy and a teacher, standing together on a porch, their hands clasped, their faces turned toward each other with expressions of such love and devotion that everyone who sees it understands immediately that this was a marriage that transcended the ordinary, a love story for the ages. Because in the end, that is what Vincent and Lily Yates proved, that love, real love, is not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It is about showing up, doing the work, lifting the weight even when it seems impossible. It is about choosing each other day after day, year after year, through storms and sunshine, through hardship and plenty. It is about building something together that neither could have built alone. And it is about the moment when one person looks at another and decides that this person, this life, this love is worth any sacrifice, any effort, any risk. The moment when you find the strength you did not know you had because the alternative is losing something more precious than your own comfort or safety. Vincent Yates lifted a tree in a snowstorm to save Lily Richardson. But in doing so, he saved himself too. Saved himself from a life of emptiness and drifting. And together they built something that will last long after the last person who knew them personally has passed away. They built a legacy of love. And that legacy lives on in every couple who chooses to face life's storms together, in every person who finds the courage to lift an impossible weight for the sake of someone they love. That is the true end of their story, not in death, but in continuation, in the ripples their love created that spread outward across time and space, touching lives they never knew, inspiring hearts they never met. The cowboy and the teacher, the man who was strong enough to lift a tree, and the woman who was strong enough to survive being trapped beneath it. Together they proved that love is the greatest strength of all, and that together two people can overcome anything, build anything, become anything, together always.